Ah, winter, the season that we've packed full of holidays to distract us from the fact that it's really goddamn cold out and everything objectively sucks right now. And with the best holidays over and done with and a month left to go before your annual reminder that no, you can't take your body pillow out to a fancy restaurant, there are a lot of hours left in the month that I'm sure you'd rather fill with something other than gnawing existential dread. And that's where anime comes in. The start of the new year means the start of a new season and a deluge of new titles to wade through, trying to figure out what will brighten your winter's day and what will only make the nights colder and darker. Luckily, you've got me to watch it all in your stead, help you sort the good from the mediocre and the hilariously awful, and tell you the 10 new shows this season that are most worth your time. On that note, I try my hardest to avoid putting second or third seasons on these lists because those are harder to get into than new shows, and I figure that most people who might be interested in them are already tuning in. But I'm making an exception to that for Mob Psycho 100 Season 2, because the first episode alone was so good that it made me realize this series as a whole might just be my favorite anime of all time, and having read the manga, I know that it's only going to get better from here. If you're unfamiliar, Mob Psycho 100 is a show about a middle schooler with incredible psychic powers named Mob, who suppresses his emotions to keep those powers in check, and as a result has a lot of trouble in social situations. Mob is somewhat ironically guided down the path to functional adulthood by a phony psychic named Reigen Arataka, who has made it his mission in life to con gullible idiots into doing things that will actually help them instead of just asking a psychic for help. As One Punch Man's smarter younger brother, Mob Psycho 100 has some of the most complex and relatable characters in anime and manga period, a profound core message about what it truly means to be a better person, and a fluid, dynamic style of animation that blows everything this side of theatrical anime productions out of the water. I know I say a lot of nice things about a lot of very nice anime, but this one is really something special, and if you're not watching it, you are seriously missing out. Not just on a good anime, but on a phenomenal source of reaction images, and on Reigen, who is objectively the best boy of 2017, 2019, and all other years, no matter what the Anime Awards say. Miles. So if the fact that you haven't gotten into it yet and there's another season you've got a marathon in order to enjoy this is scaring you off, don't think of it that way. Instead, pretend that this is the first season and it just happens to start with an episode 0 that is 4 hours, 50 minutes, and 12 seconds long. And not a second shorter, because if you skip this show's wonderful OP and ED, then you suck and I hate you. Got 'em. Now, psychic powers aren't the only vehicle for battles of the mind, and if you're looking for a series with more in the way of tactical clashes of wit, Kaguya-sama Love is War has you covered. Narrated in the overdramatic style of kaiji with dramatic inner monologues and dastardly psychological warfare to match, this anime from A1 Pictures depicts a battle for supremacy between two mental titans who lead the student council of an elite academy, Kaguya Shinomiya and Miyuki Shirogane. Both of whom are bound and determined to force the other one to confess their love, because they like each other but they don't want to give up the upper hand that they so clearly deserve. Honestly, I was sold on this series by its premise alone. The idea of two colossal narcissists concocting crazy schemes to avoid actually having to ask each other out is comic gold. It's at once hilarious for how over the top it all is and how relatable the emotions at its core are, because nobody really wants to take that first step, but someone's got to do it. Playing up that inherent awkwardness to such an absurd degree is a brilliant concept, and this rom-com delivers on it with aplomb. Kaguya and Shirogane both have a larger-than-life screen presence that gives them cute, combative chemistry with one another, and Chika, the good-hearted idiot who often comes between them, plays her part perfectly, unwittingly exacerbating their ego-driven, self-inflicted agony without ever giving off a hint of malice. If you like your comedies sharp-witted and a little mean-spirited, this is the show for you. If you prefer other sharp things, Dororo has swords, and it's really good. You are nailing this, Jeff. Dororo is a classic action horror manga created by the father of manga himself, Osamu Tezuka. It follows a wandering samurai named Hyakimaru on his quest to kill the 48 demons that stole his body parts when he was born as part of a power bargain with his father and reclaim the humanity that he lost piece by piece. He's joined in his adventures by Dororo, a mysterious young thief who apparently aims to steal the sword hidden in his prosthetic arm, but really kinda just needs a friend. It's a pretty compelling story hook, but despite that, and despite having been adopted into the first world masterpiece theater anime, that original 1967 manga has been largely overshadowed by a lot of Tezuka's other work. And if you read it, it's not hard to see why. Dororo is a sort of transitional fossil in the evolution of Tezuka's storytelling, with goofy, anachronistic comedy elements and a cartoony art style reminiscent of his earlier work being used to tell a more serious, mature story than those elements are really suited to. It's good, but tonally dissonant. Thankfully, this new anime from MAPPA strips away many of those cartoony sensibilities and plays up the series' horror elements, creating a creepier atmosphere that's better suited to its demon-infested Sengoku-era setting. The result is an adaptation with the potential to be miles better than the original, and the first 2 episodes already make good on that promise with some fantastic body horror, tight action scenes, and smart rewrites that make the new story feel better paced and more believable. But whether or not you know or care about the original source material, if you give Dororo a chance, I think you're gonna be easily swept up in its dark samurai fantasy. Speaking of dark fantasy, there's one anime this season that I can't avoid talking about. My Roommate is a Cat, a show all about the dark fantasies that a certain author dreams up about his eponymous pet. Every cat owner has imagined at one point or another that their feline companion might be trying to murder them. Mikazuki Subaru just imagines it a little more vividly than most. One day, while struggling to come up with a premise for his next novel, the socially inept mystery writer happens upon a stray cat at his parents' grave and is struck with inspiration. This sneaky little creature is clearly stalking him with ill intent. Well, okay, maybe not, but wouldn't it be neat if she was? Subaru takes the poor little creature home, convinced that by observing her he'll be able to craft his next mystery masterpiece, but he might pick up more from her than just story ideas. The hungry stray, Haru, has lived a harsh life and is slow to trust Subaru, but she begins warming up to him gradually, and while Subaru has only ever seen others as a nuisance, as he observes Haru and is forced to take better care of both himself and her, he begins to see the upsides of having someone who really cares about him around. Telling its story from both Subaru and Haru's perspectives, this sweet little slice of life comedy is buoyed by strong character writing and a wry sense of humor that keeps it from feeling too sugary. While My Roommate is a Cat definitely is going to appeal to the kind of people who spend all day looking at cute animal compilations on Facebook, it doesn't come off as something just for them, like that insufferable goddamn talking dog movie whose trailers we cannot escape. There's a lot more to this than just cute Neko Moe, and if you give it a chance, I think you'll really enjoy this story of 2 loners learning to open up and love each other. Now with that out of the way, it's time to move on from manga to light novels, and to a long-anticipated adaptation of one of the most significant works in the field, Boogiepop and Others. Boogiepop, if you don't know, is a light novel series by Kohei Kadono that began in 1998 and is widely credited with kicking off the whole light novel craze. Which, yes, means that technically speaking, Kadono-sensei is the one to blame for SAO, My Sister, My Writer, and countless other atrocities, but he also inspired Baccano and Monogatari, and if you don't hold the bad stuff against the series, I think you'll find a lot to like here. Where 2000's Boogiepop Phantom was conceived as an original sequel to the books, this new anime made for the 20th anniversary opts to directly adapt them. That doesn't mean that it won't be confusing to newcomers, but that's sort of by design. Boogiepop is a supernatural mystery told through disjointed, non-linear vignettes. It's not unlike the non-linear narrative of Baccano, which Boogiepop actually inspired, and while this approach makes the show a little hard to follow and a bit anticlimactic on first viewing, the trade-off for that is that rewatching it and picking up on things you missed before feels very satisfying. The mystery here is well constructed, and it's cool to see how your perception of events changes after you really know what's going on. That does mean that the show is best enjoyed in a marathon sitting rather than episodically, but the confused discussions on Reddit and Twitter will make following it week to week enjoyable in its own way. But that nifty narrative gimmick is far from the only thing Boogiepop has going for it. On top of the solid animation that you expect from a Shingo Natsume joint, the show features phenomenal sound design and music that gives it a surreal, unnerving vibe unlike anything else that's streaming right now. That alone, at least for me, was enough to get me past my initial confusion and keep the series engaging until I'd figured out what was going on. Next up, it's time to talk about another light novel anime, an isekai story with a lot of buzz around it, both for the talented team at its helm and... oh crap, I made this too specific to do the beat around the bush joke again. Ah well. Rising of the Shield Hero is this season's obligatory big isekai thing, and what a thing it is. As a Kinema Citrus show, it's a lavish production with strong direction, a good sense of atmosphere, great animation, and even better music, courtesy of award-winning Made in Abyss composer Kevin Penkin. Shield Hero tells the story of 4 heroes summoned to an RPG-style fantasy world to fend off evil with 4 legendary weapons. So far, so standard, but pretty quickly things go wrong. One of those heroes, guess which, is quickly betrayed by his party and left penniless without anyone to help him, forced to drag himself back up by any means necessary. There is an elephant in the room with this series, that the Shield hero Naofumi's downfall is caused by a false rape accusation. And I guess since I lean left and criticized Goblin Slayer for its first episode, people are expecting that I'm gonna hate that, but while false accusations are very rare in the real world, they do happen, and as long as this show's not saying, this is how it always is, I don't really have a problem with a fictional story using one as an inciting incident. Though the writing around this one could be a lot stronger. Almost every human being that Naofumi interacts with in this first episode comes off as a cartoonish dickhead. While he's frustratingly naive, but also the only good person there, that dynamic raised warning flags for me that he might turn into a Kirito-style Mary Sue who suffers the foolishness and malice of everyone who's not him, while solving all of their dumb problems with his big, beautiful brain and his uncanny ability to always be right. But the latter half of the episode eased those fears by showing Naofumi lashing out and acting like a dick himself, threatening townspeople to get his way, and going to a slave merchant to find a traveling companion. And as long as it doesn't try to excuse those actions, I think there's a lot of potential in an isekai narrative following an angry, morally compromised anti-hero as he walks the line between revenge and redemption. There's a lot of potential here in general. The idea that each of these heroes comes from a parallel version of Japan with a different history, and that they each represent a different isekai protagonist archetype is really cool. It seems like a good amount of thought has gone into building the fantasy world that they end up in as well, and I'm interested to see how the series will play with and maybe break away from its obvious video game inspirations. Whatever Shield Hero does with its premise though, we can at least rest assured that it will look and sound good doing it. And as someone who's a sucker for immersive fantasy worlds, that's enough for me to be excited for this show. If it's bad, I'll be really disappointed, but if it's good, I think it'll be really good. Speaking of fantasy shows, if you're a fan of those or of moe comedies, then I'd also highly recommend checking out Endro, a cute show about cute girls saving the world from a cute thing. Specifically, our hero, Yulia Charlotte, Yusha for short, and her friends must contend with the trials and tribulations of fantasy adventurer school while being sabotaged at every turn by the adorable Mao, the demon lord who she is destined to face herself, sent back in time and turned into a precocious little girl by a spell in their climactic final battle, who disguises herself as a teacher in order to prevent Yusha from ever becoming a hero in the first place. A plan that, of course, backfires spectacularly at every turn. It's a bit of a contrived premise, but the comedic dynamic that it sets up is golden. It's a cliche, but I'm a big fan of comedies where oblivious heroes bumble their way to success with the accidental help of an absurdly obvious villain saboteur, and mixing that premise with an adorable moe cast just works. All of the characters are endearing and funny with great comedic chemistry, and the animation is the smoothest and most expressive I've seen Gokumi produce so far. Now, like any moe show, this could easily get creepy fast, but thankfully Endro hasn't gone in a fanservice-y direction so far. Episode 1 lands squarely on the K-On! Pure end of the moe spectrum, and as long as it stays in that vicinity, I think it's going to be a delight to watch week to week. I've been looking for a light, relaxing comedy to enjoy, and this cute little RPG parody, which is giving me flashes of Konosuba, Mahojin Guruguru, and Yoru Yori, fits that bill nicely. I've also been looking for a good, lighthearted harem comedy to watch ever since Yuna's Haunted Hot Springs let me down last summer, and I was pleasantly surprised by Tezuka Productions' new series, The Quintessential Quintuplets. Futaro Uesugi is a smart but frugal and fiscally challenged young man who takes on a lucrative tutoring job in the hopes of paying off his family's crushing debt. The job pays 5 times the normal rate, but he soon learns that's because it comes with 5 times the trouble. The rich Nakano family has 5 unruly daughters, as the title suggests, all of whom are in grave danger of flunking out. If Futaro wants to get paid, he needs to come up with a perfect lesson plan for each of them to stop that from happening. But first, he needs to get on their good sides and convince them that he's worth paying any attention to at all. I really like how the Quintessential Quintuplets tells its story. The whole thing is framed as a flashback from Futaro and one of the quintuplets' wedding day, which creates a Nisekoi-esque air of mystery as to which of the girls he'll end up with, without falling into the Nisekoi trap of having that decision come down to fate instead of actual character agency. Each of the Nakano girls has a vibrant personality that's well defined from the get-go, and while they definitely hit your standard harem archetypes, they feel like they're more than just tropes. Likewise, the comedy in the series comes naturally from the character dynamics and has thus far managed to avoid repetitive, over-the-top harem cliches, though it's still a young show yet. Our hero, Futaro, has a clear motivation that will naturally lead him to getting closer to the girls without making it all about sex, as well as a strong personality that makes him feel like more than just an audience insert doormat. Of course, any harem comedy is going to be a little convoluted, but I was surprised by how grounded this one felt overall. And also wholesome? There's a strong emphasis placed on family bonds and not the creepy kind you usually see in anime, and while the girls are definitely attractive, the show is pretty light on overt fan service, which is really nice, actually. Much as I love my over-the-top ecchi, I also love the way that harem anime can explore their characters through interlocking love stories. That's a big part of why The World God Only Knows is one of my favorite shows, and Quintessential Quintuplets, absurd as it might sound on the surface, is shaping up to really deliver on that potential. And that's not the only series that set my expectations low, only to exceed them spectacularly. When I started watching the magnificent Kotobuki, I was almost immediately put off by its animation style, and I'm guessing that you might be too if you're looking at the screen right now. Anime already suffers from putting 3D CG characters in the background of 2D animated series, but to make the main cast of your show CGI while all of the side characters are 2D just feels backwards and wrong. And while all of the individual components of the show look good, the 2D characters are neatly drawn, and the 3D models are really well designed and animated, surprisingly so considering this is the studio that did Berserk, I don't know that there's any way that they could have executed on this approach without it being jarring. That said, once I got past that one hang-up, I found myself adoring this anime. I'm a big fan of steam and diesel punk in general, and Wild West steampunk in particular, so I was immediately on board for a show about a squadron of ace pilots protecting an airship from sky pirates as it sails above a vast, untamed desert frontier. The fact that the squadron is made up of badass, cute girls is just icing on the cake. With Shirobako's writer and director on board, it kind of goes without saying that the interactions between those girls are an absolute delight. Every joke landed for me, and their banter in the opening scene was just perfect. I would have loved to hear more of it too, but the magnificent Kotobuki seriously impressed me by opting not to let the girls talk in the cockpit. Once they're in the sky, their lives are on the line and they actually act like it, only talking when they absolutely need to. Instead of moe, then, the dogfight scenes are carried by thrilling camera work, realistic tactics, and pitch-perfect sound design. For a lot of the big battle scene, there's no music playing. The only thing that's happening is the sound of the guns and the engines, and it is still gripping. Seriously, do not make the mistake of passing the magnificent Kotobuki over simply because it looks weird, especially not if any of its themes are of any interest to you at all. It is legitimately legitimately the best directed action series of the season by a wide margin. But also, don't mistake it for the other cute girls doing dogfight show this season, because Girly Air Force is some hot garbage, and you will not get those precious seconds of your life back if you accidentally watch it. Speaking of ominous countdowns, we come at last to the end of this list, and the best new series of the season, Mob Psycho notwithstanding, The Promised Neverland. Adapted by Cloverworks from one of Shonen Jump's biggest new series and given pride of place in Fuji TV's vaunted late-night Noe Tamina block, all signs pointed to this show being incredible, and it did not disappoint. Cloverworks went all out in producing this show, and every aspect of it, from the animation to the music to the voice acting, is among the best you'll see this year. If you don't know what it's about yet, I highly recommend hopping into the first episode blind, but listen on if you're not bothered by minor spoilers. The Promised Neverland tells the story of Emma, Norman, and Ray, 3 out of 38 orphans who live carefree lives in Grace Field House, a lovely little orphanage where everyone is treated like family. Under the watchful eye of their mama Isabella, the siblings, marked with numbers on their necks, spend their days playing in the fields around the orphanage, being careful to avoid the big gate to the outside world and the fence in the woods that they should never ever cross. If you've seen an anime before, you can probably guess their life isn't quite as happy as it seems, as Emma and Norman discover the night their little sister Connie is sent out for adoption. Running after the little girl to give her a stuffed bunny that she left behind, the pair stumbles upon her corpse stuffed into the back of a truck and learns that Gracefield House is less of an orphanage and more of a farm that sells human veal to rich demons. What's more, their beloved mother is in on it all. And while things could be worse, they could be in the American foster care system, that's still not great, so Emma and Norman vow to escape with all 35 now, I guess, of their siblings in tow. But, small wrinkle, they have to do it quickly before they turn 12 and are sold off as meat themselves. For a lot of different reasons, horror generally doesn't work too well in anime, but thus far, The Promised Neverland is hitting all the right notes and creating a chilling ambiance around Grace Field House and transforming these kids' idyllic world into a nightmare. And the somewhat cutesy art style, which would cause problems for any other kind of horror, is a perfect fit for a tale of kids sneaking around to usurp a malicious parental figure. With a strong mix of mystery and suspense and an equally strong cast of characters, The Promised Neverland is shaping up to be one of this year's best anime. If you only watch one show this season, other than Mob Psycho, make it this one. I'd like to thank HIDIVE for once again sponsoring this seasonal rundown. HIDIVE, if you're not familiar, is a new anime streaming platform that sets itself apart from the competition with a strong library of proper classics like Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Patlabor, and Ninja Scroll. They have a ton of great older anime and OVAs that you can't watch anywhere else, as well as an increasingly strong simulcast library. Last season, they had Bloom Into You and Release the Spice, and this season they've got The Promised Neverland, The Magnificent Kotobuki, Domestic Girlfriend, and a few ongoing shows from last season, including the best sports anime of last year, Run with the Wind, which gives me a fantastic opportunity to say, watch Run with the Wind, you cowards. HIDIVE is a fantastic service with a lot of great quality of life features, but don't just take my word for it. Click the link in the doobly-doo to try it for yourself today. But before you go, leave a comment below letting me know what shows this season you're most excited to watch week to week, and while you're down there, I mean, you see those buttons, you know what to do. With all my start of the year housekeeping finally taken care of, we'll be getting back to your regularly scheduled analytical videos starting this weekend. Please look forward to them, onegai shimasu. I'm Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.